I must have eaten around 25 to 30 seeds, and there was constant low whisperings that I could not trace the sound of, and they got no louder depending on where I was. This was as weird as it got, until it started. I don't know exactly what happened, or how, but I was in a room all by myself, pitch black, and I couldn't see anything in front of me besides a white screen, a chair, and headphones. As if I'd been there before, I sat in front of the screen and put the headphones on my head, and my ears were filled with a sound that could best be described as a deep, grinding bass that shakes your core, undertoning a black alley cat fight, which involves a lot of trash can banging. And this caused my body to contort and throw my head around as if I was a mask salesman from Zelda. The screen was even weirder, with an endless loop of weird pictures, and by weird I mean, imagine Martin Luther King Jr. giving a speech as swastikas surround and wave around him as if he took place of Hitler. It was that level of weird. I once had to babysit a kid that ate a bunch of seeds. He wasn't lucid for at least 36 hours. He said he saw his mum die. He was hunting rabbits that weren't there, and he had full-on conversations with trees and bushes. He would see pills on the ground as he was a recovering opiate addict, and would reach down and pick up a handful of dirt and eat them. He ended up trying some rope around him like a leash because he'd constantly run away. It's a funny story now because I really disliked the guy. That was one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed. And highlight of the day, we were on a hike falling way behind our group, and after yelling at him for a good 5 minutes to follow me instead of talking to a tree, he finally starts walking my way and looks back over his shoulder to the tree he was talking to and says, "Look at the guy, he's talking to a transvestite." I never got any context or elaboration. 10 to 15 minutes after drinking my tea, my speech became slurred, and I was unable to walk, so I sat down on my friend's bed and leaned against the wall. Everything from here on is what I've been told, as I have absolutely no recollection of the events. I sat there, my condition slowly degrading, fading in and out of consciousness, and my temperature steadily rose, so I decided to call my roommate, who then called my father, and I was driven to the emergency room. I saw ants crawling all over the far wall, and wouldn't believe the nurse when she told me there was nothing there. I begged her to untie me so I could go look for myself, but she wouldn't. The ceiling rippled whenever I looked at it, and spots on the wall grew legs and walked around as huge spiders. I caught myself talking to people who were neither in the room nor the state several times, and there were moments of total lucidity sandwiched between hallucinations. I had an IV in my arm, a tube in my nose, and a catheter, and band-aids all over from various injections. It took a couple of days and several psychiatrists before I was permitted to go home. My 16-year-old nephew is currently in intensive care after taking this stuff, and still after around 30 hours is very incoherent and nearly comatose. He hasn't recognised any family members or his surroundings since this started. His pupils are dilated nearly to the size of dimes. He is apparently in living hell, as demonstrated by his horrific facial expressions of bulging eyes and uncontrollable trembling. He is continually doing sporadic mumblings, with paranoid darting eyes scanning around the room, looking at what we can only imagine, and it's very obvious that he is experiencing true terror and horrific scenes of soul hallucination. They had taken me to hospital, which I have no recollection of. I thought there were bugs all over my bed, and at the railing of the bed were snakes. I thought all of my friends were in the room, but it was only me and my mum. I kept trying to rip out my IVs or jump out of bed, and they kept having to call security. 6 doctors and nurses holding me down as I'm screaming and pushing and turning in my bed. The pain was unbearable, and the hallucinations lasted for days and days. I can't remember the period of time after I ingested the drug, but the next thing I remember is answering the door and seeing two very grotesque monsters come into the apartment. And in reality, it was my sister and her partner. I had no idea that I was hallucinating, and unlike acid, where I'm aware of reality, I was completely unaware of reality for at least the next 24 hours. I was awake all night, seeing armies of insects on the kitchen floor, playing poker with people who were not there, and having long conversations with dwarves under my bedclothes. This was not in the least funny. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. I only recall bits and pieces of the night, but the parts that I recall are terrifying. I remember looking in the bathroom mirror and seeing my pupils filled my entire iris, with no colour left over at all. I had a conversation with that person in the mirror, not even realising it was me.